Oh. Oh. Oh, hi. I was just doing some light reading here in this book. I don't know if anybody. It's looks kind of strange. I'm not sure. Found this like in my basement. It was like underneath a bunch of like boxes of shit. I don't know. I was just reading into it a little bit. But hi, I'm back today because, as some of you may know, in a review recently, I talked about a new film called Evil Dead Rise. I was very excited about it because if you can't tell by my T-shirt or this book I found in my basement, I'm a pretty big fan of the Evil Dead franchise. And so when a new Evil Dead film was announced, I was very, very excited. And so because of that, I have reviewed Evil Dead Rise. And I've sat around for a while and I've thought about this. And I thought it would be fun to rank the 5 films in the Evil Dead franchise. Now, this was one of the most difficult things I've ever done because I genuinely do not think that there is a bad film in this entire franchise. I think that all these movies are phenomenal. I love things about them, each individual one of them. And so it was really hard to kind of put them in specific positions. And I feel like this order could change at any moment just based on my feeling during that day. But this is where they're going to rank for the moment. And so I'm going to talk about that when we get into ranking them. I'm not going to include Ash vs. the Evil Dead TV series because it's a long-form television series. You get more time to do things, flesh characters out. It is fantastic, though. If you've never watched it, watch all 3 seasons. They're amazing. Add to the lore of the Evil Dead a little bit, and I just think it's great. So, as I said, I'm going to rank these from my least favorite to my favorite. As I say in all of these videos, it's my opinion. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it, but it's fun to talk about it and to hear other people's opinions. So without further ado, let's get into it right now. Coming in at number 5 is going to be Army of Darkness. Now, this film has been going around the internet a lot recently where people have put it in their number 1 spots, said I'm not really sure what people don't like that much about this movie. And don't get me wrong, I think this movie is a ton of fun, but to me it doesn't feel like an Evil Dead movie. It feels like something entirely different. It feels like Bruce Campbell just having the time of his life, being really ridiculously funny, but there is nothing scary about this movie whatsoever, which is the thing I love about the first 2 Evil Dead movies. As much as Evil Dead 2 falls into that comedic territory at moments, it's still genuinely psychologically unsettling. This movie is much more of like an action adventure film, and there are moments that I really love. I think this is definitely one of the most quotable Evil Dead movies. This is Bruce Campbell really falling into that macho man, I'm the hero of the story character traits that he has a little bit in Evil Dead 2, but obviously completely embraces in this movie. There are moments that I really just kind of find way too cheesy in this one, especially like the compositing of the mini Ashes in that moment. I just don't think it's handled all that well. I do like evil Ash in this, or bad Ash in this movie. There's a lot of really fun fight sequences in it, but what I love about the Evil Dead franchise is I love being scared and unsettled, and I love that tension. And this movie feels very low stakes. It just feels kind of like you're hanging out and having a good time, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if that's what you're searching for, but this is definitely the movie that I've revisit the least in the franchise because I just don't find that it holds up to 1 and 2 at all, or even the 2 newer films that have been made. It's not going to be the one that I run to and watch again and again compared to those films, even though I really enjoy it. Coming in at number 4, and this was really difficult, especially with Evil Dead Rise just out recently, but Evil Dead 2013 is coming in at number 4. I really love this movie a lot. I think Fede Alvarez did an amazing job at recreating the feeling of horror that you get from the original Evil Dead, while also incorporating this allegory of drug addiction and kind of showing how drug addiction can tear families apart. And I love how grisly, violent, and brutal this movie gets. I think why it falls in the 4th place for me right now, some of the more witty, dark comedy that happens with the Deadites, where they're kind of playful and they get really evil with with that playfulness is something that I really love about the Evil Dead franchise, and this has moments of that throughout, but mostly it is just a gritty, straightforward horror film, which is fine for what it is, but I do look for a little bit more of that balance and tone in the Evil Dead franchise compared to just watching an all-out grisly horror movie, which this does provide in loads, and I think this is a perfect reimagining, and I think it's a fantastic reimagining. But when I think about like the order in which I would revisit these, the ones above it on the list I would probably revisit just a hair before this, but I still really love this movie. I think Jane Levy's performance is absolutely amazing. The cinematography in this is phenomenal. There are so many iconic moments in my head that stand out. I think it is a perfect film, but there's just something about those other movies that kind of edge it out just a hair when I'd go to revisit them that I really enjoy. But I definitely think if you haven't seen the 2013 Evil Dead remake, reimagining, whatever you want to call it, you definitely should. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Evil Dead Rise. I absolutely loved this movie. I've seen a lot of complaints recently about how there was no characterization, and I think that is the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. This family that is presented to you in this film is presented in such a natural way. Their chemistry is formed in a way that feels like a family. There's not overly expositional dialogue that you're wasting your time on. The way that the Necronomicon is introduced, the vinyl records, everything that you know about the franchise is updated a little bit to kind of add new lore into it. I think that all of it is handled in a way that makes it really interesting and keeps me engaged. There wasn't a moment during this movie that I got bored or felt like I was pulled out of it. I thought the chemistry, like I said, of all the characters was great. Alyssa Sutherland's performance as the mother in this is phenomenal. She gives off a really just creepy, horrifying performance where she's manipulating her kids, because as a mother, if a mother was possessed by a deadite, she's going to use what she can to try to get as close to them as possible. And it just really, that idea of it being a family and someone that you trust that much, like your mother, just really unsettled me to the core compared to a lot of the other dynamics in these movies. And I think that's what it really hits the nail on the head with. This idea of being in an apartment complex where the staircase has fallen out and the elevator shaft is broken and you're trapped up on the 15th floor of an apartment complex is horrifying to me. This does not pull back from the gore. It is incredibly violent in a way that I found very entertaining, but the practicality of the effects in this was absolutely amazing. It didn't feel overly CGI. There was a quality to this that felt very hands-on and well put together, and it's one that since I saw it in the theater, I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I'm really looking forward to revisiting it in the near future because I loved it a lot. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead. This is the film that started it all. I think the hands-on, boots to the ground filmmaking that this movie conveys is really incredible. The amount that Sam Raimi was able to get away with when he made this movie and not get in immense amounts of trouble is very impressive. That up to using live rounds at moments and the firearms in this movie, the hooking the camera rig up to big logs and throwing them through the window and just telling the actors to move is just really impressive to me because it gives off a very real, gritty aesthetic in this movie. The characters are all phenomenal in this. I think that they all have a really great chemistry. It's not built like Rise or 2013. This is just some dumb kids that go to a cabin in the woods together that unfortunately curiosity gets the best of them, which I think the most fantastic part of the Evil Dead franchise is this whole idea of the curiosity of humanity and how we can't help ourselves but to try to gain knowledge even when it's intimidating and daunting and looks like something that we shouldn't read. We do it anyway because that's humanity in and of itself. We never learn from history and we just consistently make mistakes. And I think that that's a really cool thing in the way that that's introduced in this. I love the reel-to-reel tape recorder listening to the discovery of the Necronomicon, trying to figure out what it can do. Obviously, this film has a scene that has become very problematic over the years with the tree taking control of the woman and assaulting her. And I think it's really interesting because I know Sam Raimi has talked about it in the past, and obviously there are a lot of survivors of sexual assault, and it's important to bring up these types of issues. And I think probably at the time period, Sam Raimi had the idea of like the ultimate form of evil is someone being completely stripped of their bodily autonomy, and it is a very horrifying concept and it's terrifying, but I understand for a lot of people that the sensitive elements of that, it's really important to address those issues and make sure that, you know, they're discussed and brought to light in a way that can open up positive discussion, especially for victims of assault that have dealt with that and that have experienced that. And so I think it's important that that has been addressed over the years. But aside from that, there are so many iconic moments in this movie. The creation of that shot of the entity coming through the woods is just something truly special that exists in my head rent-free, because it is just one of the greatest, most iconic horror shots in all of history. I love the look of the Deadites in these movies. There's something so simplistic about the makeup, but that horrifies me. And then the playfulness of the Deadites in this movie is horrifying. The scene with the leg stabbing with the pencil is something that is embedded into my brain that still, even for the practicality of the effects of the time period, still unsettles me and chills me to my core. And yeah, I love this movie a lot. It's just not my favorite. And coming in at number 1, if you saw my t-shirt earlier, it's Evil Dead 2. I love Evil Dead 2. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's one of the best horror movies ever made, period. The balance of horror and comedy in this is amazing. Bruce Campbell gives one of the best performances I have ever seen in film. His bodily comedy in this is outstanding. Just watching his psychological decline through this, the scene where he's laughing with all of the furniture in the living room, still unsettles me to this day, because as funny as it comes across, being isolated in the middle of nowhere after just killing your girlfriend and trying to just be like, how am I going to survive this? And you just go so nuts, you start to laugh. I think that there's something super impressive about the way that he approaches that. The cinematography in this thing, if Sam Raimi couldn't have improved on Evil Dead 1 anymore, he does in this. There's so many iconic shots with the entity chasing Bruce Campbell through the cabin. It goes all the way through the expanse of the cabin. The enormity of this thing, even though it seems really small, is really incredible, even with like the basement sequences in this. Henrietta is obviously iconic. Ted Raimi's performance as Henrietta is fantastic. I can only imagine what it was like for him to be in that suit hours and hours a day while they're filming these things. I love when Ash goes evil in this. The stuff with his hand is unbelievable bodily comedy that just really kind of has my jaw on the floor to this day. And yeah, it's just a phenomenal movie that I could rant on and on and on about. I don't think, no matter what Evil Dead does over the next however many years, nothing will ever be as important to me as Evil Dead 2 is. I just think it is one of the greatest horror films of all time, and it's never going to move from that number 1 spot. So the rest of them could see some flip-flop, but that is where it ends today. So do you agree or disagree with my Evil Dead ranking? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what order you have these films in. As always, if you like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day. And now I'm going to get back into reading. I hope nothing horrible happens after I read this last passage of text. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.